Good afternoon on what is a bright, mild but blustery day. It is Tuesday the 1st of February. I'm back in the Nook with some parcels which I'm going to unbox and talk about for roughly 10 minutes or so. So the next one I'm going to dig into all of it is this one. Now I've already pulled out this and I was examining this which is a Swedish role-playing game from RiotMinds, and it's got 3 books in there. So what you've got is the Roy de Rat's campaign and setting, Lex Libris Game Master's Guide, and the Alter Ego, which is the Player's Guide. Now I've already looked at the Player's Guide, Alter Ego, so I'm going to pull out the next one. As you can see, it is a blustery day. Things being blown about a bit, so let's see whether I can get hold of this book. Now these are available, of course, available in a slipcases like this, or you can buy them individually. Now, LexOccultum is occultism, mystery and secret societies in the 18th century, and this is Lex Libris, the core rules. So, Lex Libris, Europe, the 18th century, the church is losing its grip on men struggling with old beliefs and dogmas. Alchemists, occultists and secret societies dig deep into old mysteries and ancient obscurities. The Enlightenment is not only about breaking free from old institutions and structures, but also about discovering what has been hidden for hundreds of years, even millennia. The Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Old Templars and other secret societies hide in dark chambers, plotting for a new world order or seeking to uncover the mysteries of dark arts and ancient wisdoms. The nobles and aristocrats are a dying breed living in decadence and excess, while the common people suffer in poverty. This is an era of enlightenment, but also of ignorance. Few know everything about the growing darkness, but the vampires and the other offspring of the devil. While conspiracies grow below the surface, kings and priests preach about submission and obedience. But who's to save men from this twilight of the gods, from falling into darkness and being consumed by evil? Is it true that the apocalypse is coming? LexOccultum takes place in a fictive, historical 18th century where the occult and supernatural are real, but not yet in full bloom. Lex Libris contains the core rules for the game master to run the game, including introduction, combat, health and fear, impressions, life in the wild, the world, sub rosa, and secret arts. Okay. So when it says at the bottom, load your flintlocks, light your lanterns, and step into the crypt. This is LexOccultum, awarded Game of the Year in Sweden under its previous name, Götterdämmerung. The role-playing game of occultism, mysteries, and secret societies in the 18th century setting is here. Now, as I say, this is from RiotMinds, and the thing is, RiotMinds is not necessarily a well-known publisher in the English-speaking market. And that's one of the problems I think we have with the role-playing hobby, is that a lot of times we don't get to hear about role-playing games in foreign markets in other languages. So we have to wait for them to be translated, and that takes time and effort. And it does kind of constrain the books to their home markets, you know, so there are some great role-playing games out there which obviously have never come to the English-speaking market. LexOccultum is one that has, although it's not as well known, of course, as, say, perhaps Symbaroum or Tales from the Loop, which are also Swedish. But I think it's great that you get to see these at last, that you get these to appear and enjoy them, you know, as players and gamers do in their own home markets. So, LexOccultum, let's have a look. This is the stock of the book. Great, nice piece of artwork on the front, and then inside you get it in full view. And we have By the Dark of the Moon, the werewolf in the graveyard. It's kind of a classic shot, actually. You know, it's almost, you know, it's, you know, where do you put a werewolf? Okay, if you depict a werewolf on the cover of a book or in artwork, it's the werewolf is either standing on a gravestone in a cemetery, or is has the a well-endowed woman in his evil clutches, that sort of thing. And here's the impression of sort of like of what the world of LexOccultum looks like. And interesting artwork throughout. It's very different. You've got two styles, with a heavy pen and ink there. Done, almost like a journal. Someone working through, their memories, like it's a diary or a journal. And very quickly, we don't have much of an explanation of the system before we get into combat. With a great combat scene there. Somebody facing off against demons or other creatures with his flintlocks. So more and more of the artwork, with a priest there, presumably attempting an exorcism. And we actually take this out of Europe. I like that. That's a nice image. And then further and further afield. So basically, monster and dominion, presumably. And then we've got health and fear. So that's actually surprisingly short chapter, actually. And then a Nosferatu-like creature. As we get on to health and fear, where we have cultists at work, or other cultists, or but basically, or members of a secret order. So we have care and healing, advanced medical aid, including damage, complications, inflammation, severe infection, mental strain, collapse, and amputation. Not for nothing is the 18th century a grim and perilous place. Again, we come back to the stalwart priest seeing to the to the sanity and sanctity of the young woman, presumably possessed by some great beast. And then we kind of descend into, we've got physical damage levels oddly explained there. I think they've got their own labels, which I obviously don't get because I'm not giving this a clear read. So they've got the first level, Salvus, healthy, third level, Valnus grave, which I presume they're using the Latin. And hey, it's 40 odd years since I was even taught Latin. So and then I have impressions. Presumably this is interaction and dealing with people. And yes, the cat who is not ours has returned. And wants some attention. So you will bear with me. We have courtly prowess, of course. Such events and places, to meet the powerful, the influential, and the inconsequential, whether good or evil, and perhaps gain their patronage, their influence, influence them. Until we go into the life in the wild, adventure points and tips. He's being very insistent about his fuss, so. Yeah, he really is. I could almost do with a third arm here just to fuss him whilst I hold these books up and talk about them. So advice for the GM and the adventure tips section. Spot of grave robbing there. Hopefully for good ends with a put something to its last final rest, and then we have an encounter with a giant beast, almost. Yeah, that's something you don't want to encounter. Then the world itself. Basically, here we begin to explore the actual setting itself, and how it differs from what the world at the period of like, and how it differs from our own history. So we do have general introduction before we get into a biblical timeline. Going through the first, second, and third age of the world. Up to the fifth, and then into the heathen timeline, which is probably the one we live by. Covers from classical antiquity through the Middle Ages and the Christian era, all the way into the Enlightenment, 1700 AD to 1700 CE, if you will, and into the future Judgment Day. So there's got a column of background, the basics of the rules explained, a society, faith and confession, of course, important aspects of society, because it would have been very, very religious, even as men were delving into science and things best left undiscovered, witchcraft and superstition. War and trade. These are really only just overviews. Essentially, they're given a page each. Crime and punishment, of course, important, because there wasn't a lot you could do that wouldn't get you punished during the period. And then we get on to the shadow world, and here a nice touch, of course, is you get the switch from the rest of the book, with its dun coloured pages, pale pages, and the shadow world with its darkness. And then we have geography, which covers England, France, the Holy Roman Empire, because this is certainly the Italy, because certainly during this period, the 30 Years War hadn't happened yet, and the beginning of the unification of Germany, pushing towards that later in the century, of course. Amsterdam. So lots of places across Europe that you can visit here, and they're all given a simple overview out into the New World with Boston, and of course, since this is a Scandinavian game, we have Copenhagen, Gothenburg, London and Paris, of course. I guess basically a page each. Actually London gets a bit more, but there are enough for introductions. You could have whole books devoted to the period. So it's covering all the capitals of major cities of the region, so including Stockholm and Venice. And we're barely, that's 125 pages into the book. So we're given overviews. Vienna's gets the least, I have to say. Barely a quarter of a page before we go into typical areas of these cities, you almost feel that some of these could have been actually folded into those descriptions. But I mean, really what they've done here, for example, is hunting grounds and nature. So we have a discussion of Corndon in Leicestershire, and then coffee houses and liquor shops. Café Procope is in Paris, and then Jonathan's Coffee House in London. Really just a case of looking at particular places within the earlier mentioned cities. Here we have a Bacchanalia. I'm just like mostly covering up the worst there. There is a debauch of the period before we get into Sub Rosa and secret societies, and we're back again to the black pages. Before we have a discussion of the different groups. So the Gnosticians, or Gnosticans, Pium Sidalicum, and again all of these could easily benefit from whole source books. We have Congregato Pro Doctrina Fidei, the Inquisition, I presume would be the enemy of many of these organisations. Campaign du Saint-Sacrement, Le Cabal des Devots, the Devoted Cabal, Hellfire Club. So, yeah, I mean, delves into this in fair amount of detail. We've got the Witch Cult. Terry Jones's Mysterious Voodoo Society. Again, wind's whipping up, and we just said it is blustery. A really nice piece of artwork there. So lots of secret societies that the player characters can involve themselves in, including the Hashins, when basically involving politics of the Middle East, and the Illuminati, of course, as you would expect. So big section on these societies, and you really could go into quite a lot of background and detail on all of these, and these are really introductions. You know, it may well be a case of the referee going to have to do her own research on these. Order of Freemasons. Quite a lengthy section on the Freemasons in here, several pages. Obviously, in part because more is known about some of these than others. They've got the Order de Slang Bleu. And the Dutch Rum and Sugar Trade Worldly Societies. So it's not all secret societies. I mean, we come on to the Dutch Roman Trade Society, which is dealing with trade there. Academic societies like the Rosicrucian Order. So you have a variety of different orders in here as well, and then you've got basically just a quick description of other minor orders that may well be developed further into the game line before we get on to beasts and antagonists at the back. So that covers, we've got lycanthropes, phantoms, vampires, spectres and wraiths. The vampires here. Actually, unfortunately, not very many of them illustrated, which is a little bit disappointing. But you've got good illustrations throughout the book. And then we've got the secret arts. secret arts of the dark arts, supernatural abilities of esotericism. So lots of things to get into, quite a deep game here, and before this will, and so basically, unfortunately, not getting quite as good a coverage, I suppose, exposure as other role-playing games from Sweden do. But I think that, this is possibly worth tracking down if you're looking for a role-playing game set during the 18th century, and want to explore sort of like the occult and Enlightenment elements of the setting. So yeah, that is Lex Libris, the core rules for LexOccultum. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, please do click on the like button. And if you've got any comments or feedback, do take the time to post those. I do appreciate both. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you will see me out here with a package and a book or game, which I will unbox and chat about for roughly 10 minutes or so, to the best of my knowledge, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back again soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.